Every so often, a young athlete comes along and is touted as the next sporting prodigy. Think of Tiger Woods putting on national television at the age of 2, or Serena Williams winning her first Grand Slam at just 17. Or how about LeBron James, who was on the cover of Sports Illustrated titled The Chosen One when he was still in high school. From a very young age, there was always something different about these people, something that separated them completely from their peers. It's like they were born to do what they do. And of course, I could name countless others: Michael Phelps, Mike Tyson, Lamine Yamal, the list goes on. What sets prodigies apart isn't just raw talent. It's a mix of early exposure, obsessive drive, and often a family that builds their world around the sport. But there is a flip side. With early success comes enormous pressure, media attention, endorsement deals, and sky-high expectations that can weigh heavily on someone who's just trying to figure out who they are. Some burn out, others either peak early or fall victim to injuries. But only a select few push through and eventually go on to become legends. Formula One has seen multiple drivers come in with a lot of hype, but probably none more so than Andrea Kimi Antonelli. I mean, people have been raving about this dude since 2022, the year he quite literally dominated everything he touched. And that dominance continued into 2023 as well. His junior career did wonders for the reputation that preceded him prior to his F1 debut, where he stepped into George Russell's car for the first practice session at his home race in Monza. Seeing the sheer number of journalists and photographers surrounding this 18-year-old kid ahead of an FP1 session was wild. But everybody wanted to capture the moment, to witness Mercedes finally unveil their young prodigy to the Formula One world. And the second he hit the track, he was pushing, hustling the car to its limit, braking deep into corners, maximizing every inch of the track both on entry and exit, and snapping the steering wheel with pinpoint accuracy and commitment. And considering how many comparisons were being made to some of the greatest names to ever grace this sport, the lights couldn't have shone brighter. For such monumental amounts of pressure to fall on shoulders as young as Kimi's, one can't even begin to conceptualize what that must have felt like. He desperately wanted to impress, for a couple of reasons. One is that Monza is home soil for him, and two is that, to his knowledge, the Mercedes seat wasn't yet guaranteed. Therefore, you can understand why he was pushing so hard and eventually too far over the limit. For your first crash in Formula One to be 52G is crazy. Thankfully, he was able to get out unscathed, and even though this was far from an ideal start, it wasn't career defining. Toto wouldn't have invested so heavily into his career if he thought Kimi would be your average Joe. They believed in his potential to become a multi-world champion in the future, with the correct support, guidance, and people around him. And that's exactly what they have at Mercedes. This team is like a finely tuned machine, built on excellence, patience, and long-term vision. And for a driver as young as Antonelli, that is everything. It's also comforting to know how much he's valued, given the success stories of previous development drivers. Mercedes took years nurturing George Russell, waiting for the right moment to elevate him to the senior team alongside Lewis Hamilton. I guess the main difference here is that the greatest driver in the team's history decided it was time for a change, opening the door wide open for another generational talent to step in. While the crash in Monza was a bit embarrassing, it was also weirdly encouraging for Mercedes. As they said, we'd rather have a problem in slowing him down than making him faster. Crashing at Monza was far from a deal breaker. It was simply a lesson in the steep learning curve he was about to undertake. The Australian Grand Prix wasn't exactly kind to F1's newcomers. For all of them, it was about as brutal a debut as you could ask for. Hot and sticky on Friday, even hotter on Saturday, and then cold, wet chaos on Sunday.
What do you mean by that?
That sounded kinda sus. His first qualifying session didn't go to plan. He was knocked out in Q1 after picking up damage from riding the curbs a bit too aggressively, something he's very well known for. And that floor damage hurt him everywhere, slowing him down on the straights and in the corners. Still, there was hope they could turn it around come race day. Starting from P16, scoring points was always going to be a stretch, but what followed was one of the most impressive debut drives we've seen in a while. He kept it out of the barriers, stayed cool in tricky conditions, and gradually started closing the gap to the cars ahead. And there were some crazy standout moments, like this insane save early in the race, and this gutsy move around the outside of Albon at turn 9. Sure, he did have a small spin mid-race and benefited from a well-timed strategy to pit for inters, but none of that takes away from the incredible drive he put in. And what really stood out was how much he grew as the race went on. You could see the confidence building lap by lap. He went from simply hanging on to actually going on the attack, and for a rookie, that's pretty good going if you ask me. After the race, Toto Wolff was trying to act nonchalant about how well Antonelli drove, saying that the team always knew his potential, particularly in the wet. This race was just a confirmation of that. And when you factor in that Kimi was the only rookie all weekend who didn't crash, not once, that says a lot. especially when you've also got experienced race-winning drivers like Carlos Sainz and Fernando Alonso getting caught out by the unpredictable conditions. Kimi showed maturity, control, and awareness way beyond his years. The next race in China was a pretty solid weekend. He looked more comfortable this time in qualifying, managing to put the car P8 on the grid. But his race took a hit early on when he ran over a piece of Leclerc's front wing end plate, and from that point on, he was consistently a few tenths slower than his teammate. Nonetheless, it was still a valuable learning experience, especially considering it was his first time driving in China. Japan was another step forward. Once again, he felt a lot more comfortable in the car and therefore had more confidence and was able to push closer to the limit. The race wasn't that eventful since the tyre compounds for that weekend were too hard and the cool track temperatures meant that deg was very low. But Antonelli still gave people something to talk about. This guy displayed supreme tyre management skills, extending his first stint on the mediums to lap 31, even pulling away from Lewis, who was on the more durable tyre. And it was at this point Kimi Antonelli broke an all-time Formula 1 record, becoming the youngest driver to lead a race in history. Then in the closing stages, he was flying, setting the fastest lap on lap 50, and once again, breaking another record, this time becoming the youngest to post the fastest lap in a Grand Prix. His pace at the end was so good that he finished the race just 1.3 seconds behind his teammate Russell after emerging from the pits around 9 seconds adrift. Realistically though, the main reason he closed the gap down this much was because George wasn't pushing, since he was stuck behind Leclerc all day. But it was still a great confidence boost that he carried over into Bahrain. Qualifying in P4 and just 2 tenths off Russell was a fantastic result. However, he lost a couple of places at the start, then got undercut during the first stint. Mercedes tried to make up for this by stopping earlier during the second stint, but fitted the soft tyres which Kimi pushed too hard early on. Then the safety car came out and Mercedes decided to pit him again for another set of softs. Arguably they should have left him out to maintain track position, especially since behind the safety car, the tyres would have cooled and he also would have had clean air after the restart. Really, it was the team that botched the strategy because Kimi did nothing wrong. But still, there were positives to take. His rapid rate of development seemed to be accelerating faster than ever. Particularly his overtaken prowess that day was shining bright, sending some brilliant moves on drivers like Verstappen and Sainz. Jeddah was a more difficult weekend for Mercedes as a team. They generally just lacked a lot of pace and cooked their tyres more than others. Kimi also made a mistake on his final Q3 run in turn 1, which explains the 4/10 gap between him and his teammate. But in Miami, he bounced back perfectly. He stunned the paddock by putting it on pole for the sprint, becoming the youngest pole sitter in Formula 1 history in any format. It was the kind of moment people had been anticipating. That first flash of brilliance where raw talent meets execution. And the fact that he pulled it off at a track that he'd never driven before, that just made it even more impressive. This was just the 6th race weekend of the year, and Kimi was handling himself like a seasoned veteran. He looked calm, composed, and totally dialed in. And it was a reminder of why there was so much hype around this kid in the first place. It was a very special moment, but his lead didn't last long. Kimi quickly realized the harsh reality of racing at the front in Formula 1. The rain made the track surface very slippery, and with Piastri committing to the inside line, Antonelli was left with nowhere to go, apart from the runoff. He fell down to P4 immediately, but still kept within touching distance of Verstappen. As the track was drying out and reaching the point of crossover to slicks, Mercedes and Red Bull came out into the pit lane to serve their drivers. However, an unsafe release led to Max losing part of his front wing and Kimi being unable to pit. It was neither of their fault, but it caused Antonelli to finish P10 when he should have been fighting for the last podium spot. Nonetheless, he moved on from that disappointment relatively quickly, and later in the day for qualifying, that speed he showed the previous day was replicated. Antonelli was only 700ths of a second away from securing a Grand Prix pole, and outqualified his teammate for the second time that weekend. In the race, he got up to second at the start, but then, when he switched to the hard tyres, he couldn't get them to work. He ended up P6, not where he would have hoped to finish. However, his speed throughout the weekend was lightning quick. Every time he's been on track, he's made significant steps forward. His rate of development has been brilliant, starting from a good foundation and gradually building on the momentum from the previous outings. And in my opinion, the scariest part about his potential is his character. He's just got this Mercedes-like pragmatism that allows him to assess situations with objectivity and not emotion, something that's lacking at certain organizations. But for a teenager in their rookie season, that's an extremely valuable quality to develop early on. Combine this with his natural speed and ever-growing skill set, he's showing all the hallmarks of a future world champion. Another hallmark of the best drivers is their ability to handle setbacks. And over the next 3 races, Kimi was faced with many of those. Described as an emotionally and mentally draining weekend, Kimi Antonelli's home race in Imola was a roller coaster. It started with reading the heartfelt, long-awaited letter from Lewis Hamilton left in his motorhome. Then came the emotional high of having his closest friends and family trackside, soaking in the moment with him. And of course, the electrifying energy of the home crowd. His first time truly feeling that in Formula 1. But Kimi knew there was a risk. All the extra attention, all the emotion could take a toll on his mental game. And in the end, he admitted it did. He wanted to savor it all, took extra time with the fans, brought his classmates into the paddock to live out the moment. But when it came time to perform, he didn't feel like himself. He said he was more tense, not as sharp or relaxed in the car. From the start of free practice, something just seemed off. He was knocked out in Q2 on Saturday, then just as his race began to show promise, his car broke down. Monaco followed, and that pretty much ended with his crash in qualifying. Mercedes did put him on a bad strategy during the race, meaning he ended up last, but really, there was nothing they could do after the poor performance on Saturday. And Spain wasn't much kinder as he suffered an engine failure. But then, in Canada, everything changed for him. Kimi Antonelli secured his first podium in Formula 1, and he earned it, passing Piastri right at the start and holding his own incredibly well. The race was all about tyre management and timing, and he nailed both. Lap after lap, he chipped away at the gap to Verstappen, closing in, pressuring him, and always looking poised to make a move, only for Max to pit just before Kimi could strike. Still, the pace was real, and the fans chanting his name in Parc Ferme, that gave me goosebumps, I'm not gonna lie. While his teammate took the win that day, Kimi walked away with something just as valuable: belief. That first podium is always the hardest, and now that he's got it, the next goal is clear: win his first Grand Prix in Formula 1. His confidence is quickly increasing, and if Canada was any indication, Kimi Antonelli is only just getting started. What I'm most excited to see is how he's going to perform during the European leg of the season. I just feel like those tracks will suit his driving style really well. Plus, he's actually got experience at a lot of them, unlike a lot of the races we've had so far. Personally, I've been massively impressed with Kimi's time management skills so far, and how fast he's learning to better all aspects of his racecraft. For Piastri as a rookie, it took him quite a bit of time before he figured out how to maximize tyre life. So the fact that Antonelli has already shown a number of glimpses where he's got it under control is superb. In addition, he's up against one of the best drivers on the grid at the moment in George Russell. And considering he was also fast-tracked to Formula 1 and straight into a works Mercedes, it really puts into perspective just how brilliant he's been. He's not just merely surviving or staying afloat, he's thriving and standing his ground against some of the very best in the sport. And it would be easy for all the hype to get to his head. However, through it all, he's managed to keep both feet on the ground and remain humble, which once again speaks to how level-headed he is. In his mind, he's looking at the bigger picture, the longer-term plan for the future. Many rising stars come into their sport with some serious talent and huge potential, but never really make the most of it. But from everything I've witnessed from him so far, Kimi doesn't seem like one of those guys. One of the great things about joining Mercedes as opposed to another high-profile team is how forgiving they are. We've seen a number of drivers in the Red Bull Academy be given very little support and then tossed to the side after just a few bad races. Mercedes, on the other hand, have a fantastic support system that won't rush him and give him time to grow and improve. Kimi has everything he needs to evolve into the driver so many believe he can become. The speed is there, the talent is undeniable. Now it's about refining that raw potential, and there's no better place to do it than Brackley. Bono has been an incredible race engineer as always, and the two have already established a great relationship. I'm sure there's going to be many great results awaiting Kimi for the remainder of 2025. And then of course, there's 2026, a clean slate for all of the teams. And signs are pointing to Mercedes being one of the teams best prepared to nail the new era. The groundwork has already been laid. If they get these regulations as right as they did back in 2014, Kimi could already find himself in a car capable of fighting for wins weekend in and weekend out. And with that, the chance to chase something even bigger. If the stars align, he could become the youngest world champion Formula 1 has ever seen. But of course, there's no rush. He's still got a lot of improvements to make, but at the same time, hopefully, a very long career ahead of him. As long as he continues doing what he's doing, all the success will come naturally. And if what we've seen so far is just the beginning, then the best chapters of Kimi Antonelli's story are still to come. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on Antonelli's rookie season so far down in the comment section below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you're new to get my latest videos in the future. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.